Oh, anyone got any storms going on in their life? Anybody? Your own little self sometimes, you might notice you've got some storms going on. And of course, we've got families who are all doing their individual thing and having their individual storms. Get all these little storm cells moving around. And oh my gosh, don't get us started on the news, right? The political storms, the items that are coming up around non-integrity that's revealing itself. My goodness. And then we've had the real storm, the Hurricane Dorian, right? People have been experiencing in different parts of the world very real storms. So I love being in a place where I can be part of a exploration and a lived, practiced experience of developing ways of being in the midst of a storm and not have to be in the outer aspects, constantly being buffeted around, constantly having things torn apart. So we see the extreme of the storm with the Dorian. I think that was a class 5, wasn't it? And so very highly destructive, the greatest destruction you can have. But then you can have little dust devils. Anyone see a little dust devil, little whirly that goes across a parking lot that stirs things up a bit, but isn't doing any destruction, is it? But you can see the whirling, the twirling of what happens as change occurs in our world. Friction happens, things bump up against one another. And I remember, Vivian, you talking about a story that you read of your grandchild, and it was talking about friction, and you can't have creation without friction. Friction is necessary, this bumping up is necessary. And so where do we call it conflict? So I love it, the eye of the storm, embracing conflict, creating peace. Anthony's song was about peacemaker. Someone who's a peacemaker is choicefully saying, I'm going to be an agent of peace. I'm going to actively engage in that. I'm not just going to stand by and let the storm whirl around me. I'm going to be the peace in the midst of the storm. And I love that this book invites us to embrace conflict. You may be like me. I was very passive aggressive. I would feel overwhelmed with conflict and be passive about it, and then I wouldn't be able to kind of contain the irritation, and I would let it pour out. And so that's not a very healthy way. Anyone else been passive aggressive? You notice that's not a very healthy way to deal with the conflict in our lives. I don't know about you, but I didn't feel good about keeping that kind of conflict inside. Physically, it doesn't feel good. You might notice physical distress, emotional distress, mental distress, relationship stress when we've got that seething resentment underneath, right? Oh, I'm not going to show it. I won't show it. But what happens with the energy in our body? Do you think people around us could feel that we were in resistance even when we're trying not to show it? And then, again, I don't know about you, but I did not feel good when I had what one psychologist called a Vesuvius. I would have like these outpourings of this conflict that was like a volcano that had been under pressure and exploded, right? And I never felt very good about the aftermath of that. And I don't think the people in my environment felt very good about that either. And so having a community read, so this is our second community read, where anyone who's interested in reading this book and then coming to the couple of gatherings where we'll have an opportunity to share what's up for us individually. I've taught this class, we've done this as a class, so quite a few people have done it in the class. the power of being able to talk to people in a community like this when we're in the storm and we realize, oh my gosh, I've been in a storm this week and I didn't know how to get back into the eye of the storm. I've been buffeted around and I've been buffeting people around. And you can come here and talk to people who are on the same page, you might say, right? And so this book is going to talk about, I just highlighted a few things about the path of spiritual warriors. This little quote here of Gary Simmons, the author. I like adventurer rather than warrior because I'm actually an agent for peace. I'm not interested in continuing to war, even if it's spiritual warring. I am an adventurer and an ambassador. You might say an ambassador for peace. But the path of spiritual warriors is to calmly and peacefully, while looking into the mouth of the dragon, remember who we really are, divine emissaries, and to think, feel, and act accordingly. So that I noticed on the information on our ad for this event, it had EYE, and I was thinking, oh, it should be I, and I thought, no, what if it's both? What if it's the I/EYE? So that the I, like that all-seeing I, that all-knowing I, that sees in the storm, under the storm, around the storm, above the storm, 360 degrees, sees what cannot be seen by the visual eye, can see with the spiritual eye, can see with the heart. And so he talks about in here, in that same place, about the Sufis say that the two rivers of heaven and earth converge in the human heart. And the heart is the bridge between heaven and earth. And part of what this I represents for me is that as we are called into developing practices to be centered as a peacemaker first within ourselves, to bring a sense of calm, a sense of greater knowing beyond what is right in front of us, a place to be in the gap. We are bridging the higher dimensions of consciousness, heaven, into the planet. We are the living temples of anchoring this truth through our own lives. Now, there might be some people in this room who had that as a part of your growing up. There are some people that I've met who grew up in unity philosophy and other philosophies, and it was really a part of their growing up. That was not a part of my growing up. My family loved them to bits, and they did the best they could, and you know, they had all of their kind of challenges. They weren't into this philosophy. They didn't have practices that would help them cope better with the stress of life. And so I've needed to find other people who can help me develop that. And to be the eye of the storm, to stand in the eye of the storm and cultivate our divine beingness, being aware of what's not working. You're going to read and hear that Gary coined a term called aware therapy or awareity. We cannot change what we are not conscious of. Our subconscious drivers, our unconscious drivers, that we started picking up by the imprinting in the first 8 years of our life. I think that's kind of what I've heard is common right now in the child development and psychology. The first 8 years, we're like little sponges and we just take everything in. And we develop all sorts of beliefs and imprinted patterning in our body from a trauma. What we consider trauma, it might not look like trauma to anybody else, but when it feels like trauma to us, we understand the imprinting that happens with that. And so in this book, it's so wonderful because he's got a process for asking questions. And the ego likes to answer questions. That instead of pointing a finger at the immature ego that is our 2-year-old and our 5-year-old and our 8-year-old, who did the best they could, with the tools and vision they had of life at the moment. Instead of pointing our finger and shaming or blaming, it's being curious. When we're in the midst of a storm and we realize, whoa, I'm twirling out there with my family drama or something that triggers us out in the news, we can start asking questions like, what am I making this to mean about me? How is it that I can feel threatened? So you're going to have an opportunity to look at this practice makes perfect, or I prefer practice makes progress. There was a musician here, David Roth, some years ago. He was all about bringing music out into our life and moving past the fear of being that expression through music. And he reminded us that we're not about perfection. We're about practice. And we get to choose and choose and choose again to practice and fall off the surfboard. If you use the metaphor of the surfboard, a world-class surfer does not get on a big giant wave the first time they go out. If they do, they probably don't survive for the next opportunity. They practice and make progress so they can go out. Have you ever been anywhere where they surf and the accomplished surfers are waiting for the big ones, right? Other people are heading to shore or going out far enough so they're not going to be affected because they know they don't have what it takes yet to be that expert surfer. So being able to have a group to talk about our practice, what's working, what didn't work. Have you ever noticed when you've been practicing something on the spiritual path and something happens in your life and you automatically respond in a more uplifted way, a more elevated way, a way of expanded consciousness? Has that ever happened to anybody? And did you notice how delightful that was to realize, oh my gosh, I didn't have to stop and think about it and make it change. It changed. And that, for me, has been really exciting to know that I've been practicing enough that the old patterning is being extinguished and the new patterning is taking place. And so being able to forgive myself when I'm not standing in the eye of the storm, when perhaps I'm actually part of the storm. Maybe I'm the one creating the conflict on the outskirts of the storm. Called to be a peacemaker. You're going to be talking about exactly what Anthony had in his song. If you want to be a deliberate peacemaker, how can we do that? In a world where we have instantaneous communication around the world, so here we've got, live streaming, people can see this very moment around the world, we are inundated with information about individual challenges, community challenges, political challenges, destruction around the world. 200 years ago, you got to hear about your little local information. You didn't hear about everything going on everywhere. So it can be a little daunting when we have all of this information coming in. And you're going to look at what's conflict and what's missing. In conflict, we often are in conflict because something is missing. We perceive something is missing. Maybe we perceive our safety is missing. Maybe we perceive our support is missing. And when Katie asked me if I would do this talk, I go, oh yeah, I've done this, taught the workshop, I've read the book a few times. Yeah, well, anybody had a meaningful book in your life and you go back to it and it's like reading a new book over again. And I got to experience a couple of storms in my life that having this book and this talk as a focus helped me keep coming into alignment. I was house sitting for some lovely people with two large dogs who normally play really well with each other. And two Saturdays ago, they decided to get into a major altercation with one another. I was actually fearful for my safety in the house because the dogs required $3,000 worth of vet bill for stitches. And my brother happened to be visiting from Medicine Hat, and he was staying with me, so it was lovely. There was another adult in the house. And in this storm, our experience of life, I remember someone in Calgary dog-sitting two large dogs, and the dogs attacked this woman and ended her life. And so as these dogs are in this major violent altercation, having my brother there with me, kind of in the eye of the storm, supporting each other, allowed me to get through those actual lived moments. And I recognized I was not in isolation. I got to be eye of the storm. Eye of the storm for me is not about isolation. Tina Thrussell, Tina's not here today, one of our board members, I was sharing this with her after the experience, and she said, oh, I like that I does not stand for isolation. And that's the lovely thing about doing a book study like this. Not to be in isolation, that we can share, we can have the wisdom of when to reach out. I needed to reach out, the adults were out of the country, and so I needed to reach out to a family member who was able to come and assist me with these dogs, because he was not afraid of being bitten by these dogs, even if they were being in a violent moment, whereas I was not keen on being bit by these dogs. And so having that support and knowing when to reach out and when to kind of go it alone a little bit, right? That going it alone a little bit, where not in isolation and feeling abandoned, feeling, oh, I'm so alone and I'm so lost and I'm so overwhelmed, but the sense of needing some time. So there was my brother helping me and this son helping me, but there was time for me to also be in the eye of the storm and just notice what was coming up for me. Noticing the fear of my lived experience with dogs, and I was bitten by a big dog when I was 7, and just came up out of this nowhere and bit me. Oh, leave dogs alone and they'll leave you alone. Like, well, that dog didn't leave me alone. And so I had this kind of lived experience that all played into being the storm around me with these dogs and that experience that I had. And what keeps coming to me in this eye of the storm, does anyone know that yin and yang sign? You've got the white and the black that move around each other. To me, there's movement there. I like that it's not a half circle and half black and half white. There's movement in that symbol, that yin and yang sign. It's, for me, moving and swirling and twirling. And so as I was being present to the situation with these dogs, called forth the help that I needed to, get them to the vet, etc., deal with all that, I could feel these little inner parts that were feeling afraid, feeling of the inner child that was feeling afraid, the woman who had heard about the caregiver of these dogs being killed by dogs that suddenly turned vicious, and I had seen the viciousness of those dogs. I mean, literally, the pit bull, one was a pit bull. When I first met her, she rolled over on her back and showed me her belly, and she's the most loving pit bull. My sister can attest to that. She doesn't like big dogs either. This dog was just amazingly loving, and the big black lab, and this dog stands like this high, this beautiful rescue dog. I had a lived experience in that moment, and then these other factors. So in the Awareness, we are invited to notice what factors are influencing us. How is it I can feel that this is a dangerous? And maybe it is. Maybe we need to be aware. Is there a clear and present danger? Because if there is a clear and present danger, then how can we stay as centered as possible so that we can make choices and decisions that help us have the highest outcome? So it's not that there's not ever a clear and present danger. Sometimes you and I have had to make some pretty rapid decisions about things that are life-threatening or potentially life-altering. And in the midst of that, there was an opportunity to be with a young man who is experiencing the challenges of drug addiction and altered thinking, and shared with me that he had surrendered his soul to Satan. Now, I don't believe in Satan as a personage, but if someone surrenders their soul to Satan and gives up reverence for life, and he had a belief that violence was just a part of life and people hurt each other, it's just a part of life. And I have lived experience with a dear friend who was killed by her own son in an alcoholic psychosis. giving over. And we know from our community here, and the 5 young people that died in Brentwood 5 years ago, you know, we don't know how far an altered mind can go. So I'm in this place with this being who's just shared this with me, and I'm needing to make a decision about safety. Is there a clear and present danger? Well, I didn't really know, but I needed to make decisions about not having that person in that space so that I did not have to decrease the chance of becoming one of the statistics, right? And so I don't know how far that would have gone, but being able to have this, you know, calling on people for some guidance on that and what to do about it, not being in isolation, but at the very same time, it's kind of occurring, it was occurring at the same time. Knowing what to reach out, what to share, and then noticing these parts of me inside that were in conflict as the conflict was around me. And so it's not isolation, it's not insular for me, being uninterested in ideas and cultures outside of my own experience. I'm not looking to be insular from the world. I'm not looking to be completely independent in that I don't need anyone else. The I for me would be more like interdependence, which is a mutual dependence between things, which is in nature all around us. We do not exist completely independent. A hermit out in the woods is relying on nature. Might not be relying on people, but is relying on nature. And interbeing is a state that Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk and a scholar, he's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, and he coined interdependent to interbeing, a state of connectedness and interdependence of all phenomena. It means to interdependently coexist. Unity of Calgary as a spiritual community cannot exist without interbeing and interdependency. One person cannot be a spiritual community. And so this is a great place to explore all of that. And I also for me stands for integrate. How do we integrate the divine being that we are, the true divine nature that we are, the emissary of light that we are, and the egoic personality construct that we came to be? If I was just going to be my divine essence, and wasn't looking to be in a place of conflict, wasn't looking to be in a place where I could need to be the eye of the storm, I would not have come to planet Earth. Right? We're on a planet of contrast. We're on a planet where the very physics of evolution requires that friction that children's book was talking about. And so, if you've been thinking about this book and wondering about it, I highly recommend you at least look at it at the back. You can talk to me. Who has already studied Eye of the Storm? And just put your hands up. So, you know, look around at the people that have done it. If you would like to have a conversation about what this has meant to them, if you're trying to figure out if you want to read it, I highly recommend, if you're looking for a place to be in community and supported in the transformation of your life from being either the instigator of the eye of the storm and or the one that feels kicked around constantly in the outer skirts of the storm, the winds of separation and competition, etc., then I highly recommend you consider that and join us in this group read. And together we can become not just individual, I don't want to say pillar, seems rigid, but that light that we are, that bridge between heaven and earth, we can also, with each one of us becoming that and emanating that into our community becomes an even more powerful expression into the world as we express our own divine essence. So really, this all ties into our vision and our mission. And the ushers are going to pass out these little baubles. Katie, these were from the centerpiece. Well, these aren't, I bought these, but these were in the centerpiece at the Unity Conference that we hosted in 2016. And I was, let's just have a look at that. It's a little plastic thing that's cheapo. It's from the dollar store. But it's multifaceted. And if you imagine that it was a diamond instead of plastic, if this was a real diamond is created under pressure. A diamond is not created without pressure. And the conflicts of our lives can put a lot of pressure on us. It's coal under so much pressure over a prolonged period of time. We end up with a raw diamond. You do not get a diamond like this out of the ground. You get a diamond like this because facets have been chosen. And so I see us as multifaceted personalities. You have many facets of who you are. You're not a one-faceted person. And we are multi-dimensional beings. We're not just our human body. We are multi-dimensional. So I'm going to take you into a meditation, and I invite you to hold this little replication of your own brilliance and the life that you have lived and the facets that have been cut by the very experience of you and the very conflicts of you. And so we are singing I